Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jacob with Unleashing Intuition Secrets. And I'm joined today by best-selling author Leo Zagami. We're going to talk about his latest book, in my opinion, his masterpiece in the Confessions of Illuminati series, book number 7. Leo, thanks for joining us.
It's always a pleasure. When I get your reviews of my books, I'm encouraged. So thank you so much and for reading it and for bringing me back to your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have been reading your book, and it's absolutely amazing. We were talking before the show, and I was telling you that, your books are amazing because I have pretty much, all of your books. So they're right here with me. They're the type of books that you can open anywhere and go, oh my God, that's amazing. That's so insightful. And, I was talking about how I was in the Navy SEAL teams at really high levels, at the highest level in the SEAL Team 6, and then the CIA, working in the CIA. So I saw a lot of stuff. I have some really good insight. But when I read your books, I'm like, how does he know all this? But, you are among the Illuminati, and they're the ones that basically are controlling the world. So you're ahead of the ball game with your information. So I thank you for your work and what you're sharing.
Well, unfortunately, we are ahead of the game, and the game it's actually unveiling in front of our eyes is now with, let's say, the last part of it, the last phase, the last section of it that will lead us into the hands of Cyber Satan. And my book, as you have read, is about also showing to the people not only the geopolitical or business side of the World Economic Forum and the Davos agenda, but rather the occult side of establishing this Fourth Reich. And as you know, I published this book in February, in early February, and I already unveiled what will happen next with Ukraine, with Taiwan, and all the implications of this great global transformation. And sadly, I'm always right, but that's not, it doesn't necessarily make me always happy, because I wish the world was definitely a better place.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I was predicting the Russia conflict as well, and I was accurate. But you're right. It's never good to be accurate in something that's going to be a negative, but it's important to inform people so that we can start to tear down their system, because the information, being informed, is part of the multi-step process of taking down their Fourth Reich ideals.
Yes, and of course, in this latest book, I wanted to show the people the occult background, but I also wanted to prepare them for what is next, what kind of solutions you might want to find for yourself, for your family, and where to live, where not to live, advising people really on some practical you see, there is a practical side also to that book that you have hold in your hands. And I think that's important, because people, now that they know the truth, they need to also prepare for what's coming. It's not only an intellectual exercise, it's about being aware and ready, because if we are not ready, if we don't have a storable food, our weapons, our solar generators, all these things that are unfortunately a requirement for being ready in these difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the stuff you recommend, I've moved in that direction, the solar generator and the food sources and so forth. I've been promoting that for a long time. So it is good that, you have the foundations, but a lot of people want to know what you know, and you have revealed and consistently, like you're just mentioning, that what's coming because you've been on the inside and you know how these guys think in a way that
like I showed in the book, for example. Even the World Economic Forum comes from a background which is both to to be found in the Masonic as well as in the Vatican, with the Pact of the Catacombs, which, for example, I unveil in the book. It shows how Klaus Schwab at one point invited the bishop who really launched what would become later known as liberation theology and the basis for this progressive Marxist reform of the church, which is not only to do with the church, but it's to do with the reality of everyday life, because in those Marxist points that they basically underlined in this secret meeting that happened in December 1965 at the end of the Second Vatican, what is known as the Second Vatican Council, which is a pivotal event for the Catholic Church, but not only for the church. I repeat, these things don't only involve the church. When we have seen Nancy Pelosi one more time showing her face next to the Pope, going basically to take communion from a Pope when she was forbidden by her own Archbishop in San Francisco, it shows also the defiance, but also it shows you who is really ruling the world and how her drunken husband, who was basically arrested, but at the same time he's an untouchable, and they are both untouchable. They can go to Rome, they can take communion, partake in one of the most holy acts of the Catholic Church, which should be deserved only if you have confessed your sins, or if you have not partaken in terrible acts like the support of abortion, which I consider just another name for human sacrifice, because that's what it is, regardless of if you have a fetus problem, a health issue, or you've been, I don't know what. I mean, but I'm talking about the fact that there is too much division in America today for not writing off one of the possibilities which I have addressed in my book. If you remember, I wrote which are the possibilities of social collapse in the United States, and amongst them the Civil War, because there's such a division here in the United States between blue and red states that it seems almost inevitable that if we don't reconcile, we will, and in the interest of breaking this United States of America and literally destroying the tenets of our Constitution, come from very far away. Like I also explained in my new book, as you know, in the last part of my new book, I talk also about the choice that the founders of America made for a republic, why they chose that rather than a monarchy. In that moment of time, it seemed like the best choice possible. And it is the only republic on which we stand, which is built with certain peculiar characteristics. It's not really a democracy, but rather a constitutional republic. Now, we know, though, that those people that in 1776, we told them to, sorry if I say that, screw themselves, you know, they were the European elite. We stick a finger at the European elite on the 4th of July, when, you know, when we celebrate. And they hate that. And it's like, it's their revenge now. When we see people like Klaus Schwab, which is the modern day Adam Weishaupt, and this is another parallel, which, as you know, I address in my book. I just show how they picked up from the old teachings and brought them along. You know, there is a long tradition here of wanting to destroy, for example, private property, of wanting to address this greater reset, which now seems a novelty, but actually the basis of it, like I explained in my book, was born a long time ago. And now they are maybe even successful in their endeavor, because unfortunately it seems like people are too divided. The divide and conquer, it's always something that they use on a constant basis, you know, is a technique. And we are also victims at times of psyops. I explained also, for example, the QAnon psyop in in my book, which is important to address, I think, as well as the fact that from being brainwashed on social media, being maybe led astray from various theories, then you end up into the metaverse, courtesy of cyber Satan, in this digital prison that is probably the place where most people, the common folk, will be relegated, while the rich and famous will go and take refuge in their private islands, like they did during the pandemic, where you had all these private planes on these, everybody was having problems of transportation. You could not really enter an airport without all these controls and all these things. But then you have the rich and famous who definitely have always an advantage because they can fly around like John Kerry. He goes around, he pollutes, leaves his carbon footprint all over the place, and then he likes to preach about how we should embrace the green agenda. Well, these people are about hypocrisy, so they're gonna tell you exactly what they are doing, but not to do it. It's like the rules are for them, but not for them. And it's basically from that point onwards that we realize that these people, they don't care, and so they're gonna crash the whole economy. They have their safe investments. They will probably take refuge in the abyss of the oceans or in the skies or anywhere, because now you have all kinds of new technological fancy ways of cutting yourself a hideout somewhere. Now, and
I will direct everybody to your website too, leozagami.com. Excellent article. I was reading that before the show. Top secret: how the Illuminati and their allies and friends are preparing for societal collapse. You're outlining, how these guys basically, during that pandemic, they flew out to all these the islands like you're talking about, and they jammed up the airport and the small airports of like Kalispell, Montana, and I just it's very obvious, these guys don't care about green energy. They're like wasting it like crazy. The carbon footprints all over the place for these guys, but they want to suppress us, drive us into a Fourth Reich.
Yeah, and the Fourth Reich is a reality which is not only just a bland theory of the return of Adolf Hitler. It's basically a practical thing. When you see what's happening in Ukraine, when you see the Nazi regalia used by the Azov battalion, I mean, this is a practical thing. People don't realize certain connections, which I, of course, talk about also in this book. I talk, for example, about the dark side of the Illuminati in Austria, how important it was in that theosophical milieu. These theories kind of rose to the attention of one guy. It took only one guy, Adolf Hitler, who was born and raised in Austria, and he ended up then doing all that damage. But he was picking it up from somewhere else. It was this Theosophical Society born in 1875, by the way, by a woman born in Ukraine. Wow. Madame Blavatsky was born in Ukraine. Now, if we go by what I wrote in this book, which is basically that modern Satanism, it's born really out of the Theosophical Society, because even Aleister Crowley's the OTO and Aleister Crowley and all that milieu, they were all coming from the same people that were, it wasn't like such a big movement. And so it was extremely influential what was done back then, and we are still suffering the consequences now. So when Madame Blavatsky ended up then founding here in America the Theosophical Society, after she went around Russia, around the world, she was born in Ukraine. she created an organization that then functioned as a structure that could be used by the intelligence organizations, mainly the British one, because at the time it was much better organized, because you know that until the OSS came along and then the CIA from it, America didn't have such a established intelligence service and intelligence community. And then after that, then of course, it became the #1 intelligence community in the world now. But if we go back in time, the Theosophical Society was mostly used by the British, the Commonwealth of the British Empire, because the British Empire was also the most powerful one back then. And so this Theosophical Society wasn't only a society that was bringing some bizarre theories of unifying the philosophies of the East and the West and this and that and all the other. And of course, with a publication like Lucifer, because Madame Blavatsky had a publication called Lucifer. And in one of these publications published by a guy who was a German guy, Franz Hartmann, they put for the first time the swastika. And then from there, like I explained in the book, Adolf Hitler got inspired. And at the same time, it got inspired also by people there in Austria that were starting to bring this Ariosophy, this theory about the superiority of the Aryan people. And that led to another great catastrophe, unfortunately, and millions of people dying in concentration camps. So history needs to be studied in detail, and we need to understand it thoroughly. Instead, we are given usually in the academic world of today a superficial take of things. And that is because, of course, they want to leave the common folk out of maybe analyzing too closely where power is really manifesting from. I think that is the main reason. And another thing that we discussed before we started the show was, of course, the fact that you moved, of course. I'm still here in California, but I actually also explain in my book in chapter 2, as you know, the liberal pandemic that started in California.
Right.
And why I'm here, because as a doctor or a scientist, we'll probably have to go to China to start studying where this virus or where it's coming from. We all know where it's coming from, but of course, where is this coming from? And we have to go there where it's coming from. So I explain how, for me, it's been very important in order to understand further this disease, because we can, of course, joke, we can say libtards, we can say lefties, we can joke all day long about it. But this woke philosophy, it's in itself a virus.
Yes. Yes.
And for that reason, I wanted to explain where this virus was coming from, how California has been so important, also because, of course, it has then produced one of the most important tools of the propaganda, which is Hollywood. That's why, as I was telling you in private before, I'm preparing now a new book that will be out hopefully by the end of the summer, the fall maximum. And it's a new book that focuses on Hollywood, because Hollywood at the moment is starting to decline, to collapse on itself. When you go woke, you go broke, no? But it doesn't work only for the shop. It doesn't work only for a store that makes a decision to carry or not Mike Lindell's pillow. It also works for other things. So if you push aggressively, like Netflix, a bunch of woke movies, then you end up after 6 months with a turnout in your profits, which is not really that good. Well, you have to blame only yourself. The same thing can be said for Mark Zuckerberg. Now it's complaining he will have to put on leave a lot of people. well, welcome, Mark. You have done the same mistake as everybody else. I mean, it definitely doesn't pay, but they're not doing it necessarily for the money. They're doing it because it's part of this structure, this propaganda game. And if back in the days, I discuss also this in the book, I know, I talk about McCarthyism. I talk about how there was the McCarthyism era and what it produced, but at the same time, nowadays we are right at the opposite of McCarthyism. Now we are encouraging communism rather than condemning it, because the problem is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, we thought that the communism was simply defeated, and that was it. We never invested any more money in it. The intelligence structures kind of turned the other way. They started to say, well, who cares? These are good guys. We have to focus on the threat of the mass murder. We have to focus, you know, it's kind of like, and so they go from one problem to the other. So they went from communism, then the Islam, and now we are actually in the worst part, in which they turn against the patriots, against the who really love their country, who would like to celebrate the 4th of July and be proud of their country, and instead they're beaten down, and they are almost said not to celebrate. Oh, but the 4th of July has some, maybe some racist connotations. We have to be careful.
Yeah.
So that's how it is. But I wanted to explain in my book the connection with the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome, because in this connection, there is also the involvement of MIT and the studies that they carried in the early 70s regarding the future of the world. Now, what happened was that they experimented with their first giant computers. Artificial intelligence at the very early stages was made up of computers that were as big as a house, even bigger, as big as a building. And they were, of course, experimenting also, and this by direct orders of the Club of Rome, which is an institution which was formed, shaped in the end of the 60s, just prior to the World Economic Forum. It started, of course, with the first club in Rome, and then evolved. And still nowadays, in like 50 different cities, you have all these clubs, but the mother club is like the mother lodges in Rome. The people who created it, who founded this Club of Rome, was Aurelio Peccei and then another gentleman from Scotland. These two people met in a proper, of course, under the patronage of the Rockefeller family, and they eventually will establish this club. This club then was very much more theoretical, and it still is more theoretical than the World Economic Forum. So Klaus Schwab, he liked what they were doing, but he wanted something more operative, something that will go, like he says himself, that will infiltrate the governments of the world, basically. And he actually says it openly today, so he doesn't even hide it. And at that point, he started this project in Davos. Then from the second year, he called it World Economic Forum. And at that point, he invited, I think it was 1973, for the opening speech, he invited Aurelio Peccei from the Club of Rome to talk about the study that was commissioned at MIT regarding the future of the world. How sustainable is this world? So what should we do from here to 2020 and afterwards? And from that moment onwards, they started to come up with all this rubbish. We can't sustain all this. And so at that point, they started to plan the biological warfare, the various wars to eventually eliminate part of the global population, which is, of course, a terrible Orwellian plan that is unfortunately taking place as we speak. Right. And instead, though, there is another thing that I discuss and point out. The first ever meeting in Davos was with a very particular guy, a guy which I talk about, not many people maybe know who he is, Otto von Habsburg. And Otto von Habsburg is the last representative of the Austro-Hungarian Empire that, of course, was he didn't really carry on becoming what he was supposed to become, because then the Austro-Hungarian Empire ceased to exist. But Otto von Habsburg is a very important figure, because he, like other important figures from the European royalty, who have worked behind the scenes also to create things like the Club Bilderberg and all these various think tanks that in a way serve the purpose of controlling behind closed doors without being too visible, because we can't, you know, Otto von Habsburg, the Grand Master of the Order of the Golden Fleece, the guy who was connected to the Teutonic Knights. These are things that we as modern people think they are from distant past. They don't have anything to do with the reality. Now we have democracy. Well, let me tell you guys that you're living in an illusion. These people have controlled you all along. And America has managed to separate from that in 1776, from all that, but not completely, because we still had those secret societies like the Skull and Bones in Yale or in Harvard School. You have all these secret societies that are all part of this network that in a way, it's always made of the usual bloodlines. Just watch John Kerry. I mean, John Kerry is a typical example. And he's still one of the people in a key position. Who will ever vote for John Kerry? I mean, when he went there, and nobody, but we still have them, and he still seems to have a key role. These people, nobody has to elect them. They just appoint themselves and do whatever they want. In Europe, which is already a technocracy that doesn't have the same kind of constitutional guarantees that America at least preserve the right to free speech. We can bear guns. We can, for the moment, they don't have all that. They don't have the guns. They don't have the right for free speech, because I can guarantee you, I'm even myself, I had to leave Europe, as you know, in 2019. I had to flee Italy. I would probably never be able to go back to Europe, at least as a European, maybe as an American when I become American, but as a European, I will never go back to Europe, because they will kill me, arrest me. I have revealed too much for them. And when you reveal too much, it becomes a problem. So I made some sacrifices in order to bring out this book, this work that I'm doing here. But I'm glad that people like you are appreciating it, because now here on this side of the world, where I can finally work freely without, you know, being afraid of somebody breaking through my door after I write a post on Facebook or I make a video. Here I'm actually writing some interesting material. I'm putting together some stuff that maybe was even too dangerous for me to bring out while I was in Italy, or in Europe in general, because before living in Italy, until 2008, I was in Norway, ended up with an accusation of espionage. I mean, which is crazy, because I mean, we are supposed to be all NATO countries, but suddenly ended up with an accusation, and I ended up arrested in Norway after, of course, this whole thing was dropped by the Norwegian PST. But look at Norway now. Just the other day, a woke short circuit with a guy, an Iranian Muslim, going and killing in a gay bar people from the LGBT. This is because they have encouraged all these Islamic people to come into Europe.
Right.
I mean, in country like Norway, they refuse my request for citizenship, and I actually have a child in Norway, but they give it to Muslims from Iran, like this guy. And now you are surprised that these people are going to go after the gay community? Well, I'm sorry, but there is a short circuit waiting to happen there.
Yeah,
and it's
definitely.
made on purpose, I'm afraid, because all of this, all of what we are seeing is made because Europe is going to definitely become the battleground for this third world war, I'm afraid. And I would like your take on that, as you have a military background.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you've made the point that NATO, Europe, is basically collapsing, and this war that's going on right now is going to spill over and continue to grow. And we're seeing like there's over 100,000 U.S. military that are there, and they're building that up. So they're building this up into something.
There is more military now just sent to Italy in the last week. There has been more military there. There is more military in the Baltic states, which is particularly worrying because you have the Kaliningrad enclave, which is just between the Baltics and Poland, between Lithuania and Poland, which is a Russian territory, which was agreed. I mean, these are all, you know, it's like we might discuss, but I think even Ukraine in the end should have just stayed under the sphere of influence of Russia, because we should have just maintained that peace that cost millions of lives in the Second World War.
Right.
And in the end, those leaders came together in Yalta. They came together, they met, and they agreed. And from there on, we lived great period of prosperity. Of course, we had the Cold War. The Cold War was always about threats upon threats upon threats. It was the strategy, of course, of another character, which is a protagonist of this book, which is Henry Kissinger, which, of course, I'm a great reader of Kissinger's books. And my cousin used to be his personal bodyguard. But Henry Kissinger basically is still a very important guy. Even the other month, when he actually said something good. He said that Ukraine should have just seized some territory and we should have come to a deal to end up with this as soon as possible.
Wow.
He was kind of like, I think because he's reaching the end of his life, he's always been very Machiavellic. Like all these people at that level of power, they always been very But when you arrive at the end of your life, you don't care about saying the truth and saying, listen, man, you should just do it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're going to end up dying and everybody's going to be taken from you. And there is an important thing that Kissinger wrote, I think on his latest book, which I talk about here on the AI, because Kissinger has written a book on the AI. And on that book, he writes about how Taiwan was born. Taiwan was simply born because in the 1950s, China didn't have the nuclear weapons. So basically, America said, leave alone Thailand, otherwise we will nuke you. And Mao Zedong, okay, fine. It was very easy. Just had to threaten them. I'm going to nuke you. But now they have over 300 nukes minimum. Probably they have 500.
Yeah.
They have hypersonic nukes. They're very powerful, so they want to go and get what they wanted to already get in the 50s. So
yeah, I think that's coming too. I think that we're gonna face that, and because Biden's so weak, I think they're gonna make their move just like Russia did.
Biden is, I think, that is deliberately a weak character.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Power, because then behind the scenes they can get away with anything.
Now, and you've written a lot of other books. I don't want to get too far off your Confessions of Illuminati book 7, but in your book, The Invisible Master, you talk in chapter 4, reptilians, vril, bloodlines. I was like, what? You're way down the rabbit hole. I thought that was very interesting. In chapter 3, you say, what's more sinister than communism? An alien invasion, So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that is something else which I discussed in detail, because people never really think about the fact that if we are dealing now with the AI revolution, now we are actually in the last few weeks, there is a lot of talk about it because of the sentient AI. AI has suddenly feelings, but an alien civilization might have already gone through that stage. And so in my latest book, I wanted to discuss that because I explained how we might have been led towards a trap which is put there by an alien force. And that alien force, of course, will manifest itself once we are all trapped through the AI that is established here on Earth.
Right.
I mean, we have China, which is not really the defender of democracy, that went into Hong Kong today and said, "We brought you democracy 25 years." And I was like, what is he saying? It's shocking, you know? But the Chinese have given their word. By 2030, they want to be the leaders in the AI. And at that point, it will be, of course, much more easy for an alien intelligence to connect simply between algorithms, AI, and that's it. They don't need to do anything. They already have the whole of civilization deliberately through our own mobile phones, our own information that we rely here on the internet, everywhere that we go. They control us. They don't need to arrive with the Independence Day spaceships over our heads at that point, Michael. Yeah. And that's why in my book, I explain also the astronomical observatory Lucifer in Arizona, the implications with the Jesuit order being the scientist of the Vatican. But it's rather incredible that we are dealing with artificial intelligence without thinking about the alien implications. Because just a couple of weeks ago, China said, we have received signals from an alien civilization. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple of weeks ago. China. It's kind of like a bit, no? And that's why I wanted to write about the last stage of the artificial intelligence as the manifestation of what is called Ahriman in anthroposophy. And it's symbolized here because you see there is a lot of symbols here in the cover of the book that need to be analyzed one by one. Ahriman symbol is this one, was made by Rudolf Steiner, who carved it in wood. Then this symbol basically of the Antichrist. Then here the symbol of Ahriman is also this that statue that was put in front of the United Nations till early January. And then you have the symbol, of course, we all know because it's the symbol also used by the sanitary dictatorship, World Health Organization, aiding and abetting the rise of the cyber Satan. And then behind, though, if you see very carefully behind here, sometimes in the press it comes more clear, sometimes no. But basically behind here, there is a dragon. And so the dragon of China. So this is basically part of the symbolism of it. Of course, we have also volume 6.66, which is very important symbolism. There is the metropolis, this satanic symbol that was pretty evident. But it is the age of cyber Satan. So it's important to discuss it.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail in this. Wow.
And I tell you
that's amazing.
I tell you who made this. Okay, this cover is made by a very old friend of mine. We grew up together. For a period of time, he's now a master in art. He has a, he's like University of Perugia Master in Art. He's a graphic designer, a very sought after graphic designer. But he, for a period of time, was in the Temple of Psychic Youth.
Wow.
Which is, I don't know if you ever heard of, it's a secret society, very popular among the music business people in the 80s.
Interesting.
Which I will talk about in detail in volume 8 of my confessions.
Oh, good, good.
And he was in this secret society for a period of time, which is very much entrenched with the symbolism, occultism. So, I mean, the guy who I made it with is himself somebody who knows things. So it wasn't just like a profane individual, let's say, somebody who was initiated into these things. And that's why I think we come up with such brilliant covers, because there is a more profound understanding of the symbols, which I think is important, because you judge the book by the cover.
Good point.
At times.
Good point.
So, and this cover needs to project a lot of things. If you go in the back, for example, you find me in what is a cave. This place here is actually a very particular place. It's actually called the birthplace of the monastic tradition in Subiaco near Rome. And here, of course, you have the symbol of COVID.
I like the way you're looking up at it. That's like, oh, I see you. I know you. I know you for what you're about.
Well, yeah, actually, people don't know, but I was watching at the cameras, trying not to get the guy. Usually when I'm in that place and I was doing my photo shots, I had to do it in a sneaky way.
Oh, yeah.
There was a bunch of cameras that the monks keep on. So that was it. But in my work that I'm trying to do, as you know, I try to expose things, but also invite people to a further analysis. That's why I'm glad that you have noticed that you can open at whatever page and you can really get a lot of answers, but also you can go to the end of the book in the citations. And here in this book, let me tell our viewers how many citations there is, and they are all in very thoroughly. There is something like 537 citations that are kind of. But it's very important also when you cite some source to get the right source, to get a source that you can trust, to be able to have various confirmations. So you need to make this credible. Also because here I'm talking about some very powerful people. If you don't do that, they will come after you and sue your ass in a second.
Wow, that's good.
I mean, you need to be very thorough about what you write.
Yeah. You know, another thing that I love, and that's one of the reasons why I get your books. I don't get very many books. I usually do, you know, like online books and stuff like that. But your books have excellent pictures and photography in them. Very, very good.
Thank
and
you.
I love that kind of detail, because I can look at a picture and get it. It's worth 1,000 words, right? So you have lots of pictures in your books. So that's one of another reasons I would suggest that people actually get your book.
The concept was born from the first book I did, was to be analytical, but also analogical, not only logical. What does it mean, analogical? In the old traditions, before logic came around, in the old schools of ancient Rome, everything was built after the art of analogy. For each symbol, there was a meaning, and you will learn that meaning through that symbol. Now, this is actually coming back to us in the computer world of today, because when I go on my desktop, I'm dealing with symbols nowadays.
Yeah. So I love the book, by Manly P. Hall. You know, he's got that one volume, and you've mentioned it, and you've had Manly P. Hall. You've quoted him quite a bit in some of your work. Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and
actually,
so it's quite a tome. It's got, like your book, it has excellent, pictures in it.
One thing about Manly P. Hall I want to tell you is that he, of course, left his legacy and all his books and things, part of his writings, to my dear friend, the late Jordan Maxwell, which is also cited in this book.
Wow.
Jordan was left a lot of his material. Unfortunately, when he was in difficulty, he was offered to go to Panama so he could scan all this material. It was hundreds of things. So, and unfortunately, it went on fire. They set fire to the whole collection of writings of Manly P. Hall and stuff that he was actually given after Manly P. Hall's death, because he befriended Manly P. Hall late in life, and he was entrusted with all of it. But one thing that with the Jordan, and this is actually it's sad because it was the last time I saw him. I came out with the book. I was lucky enough that he was living half an hour from where I live here in Palm Desert. And I went to give him the first copy of my book. And I filmed that event. He was in his wheelchair. And I'm very glad that I was capable of showing him the respect through not a dedication, but actually a passage in the book that talks about Jordan Maxwell's legacy and his importance. And I'm glad I did that, because these are people who have done a lot. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, nobody was talking about the New World Order. Nobody was talking about the secret societies outside of certain environments. And only people like Jordan Maxwell, and before him, of course, Manly P. Hall. But Manly P. Hall was already more Masonic, because he was a Mason, and he was actually very public about, and he was actually a very high-level Mason within the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. So, but he was one of those Masons, old school, when Masonry was still. And I also explain this in my book, as you know. I explain my disappointment for contemporary Masonry here in California, in particularly, but all over the place. Masonry, like most other institutions, is suffering from the main problem, which is the human material, man, human material, because in the end, these institutions represent the reflections of who we are.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one of the reasons why you have been somewhat left alone, because you speak highly of those organizations, because you went into them because you wanted to learn deeper insights. And so they shared deeper insights with you. And then you found out, oh, not so much. Kind of like the way I was when I worked for the CIA. Oh, there's evil here. So it's, you work with these organizations for, the betterment of mankind. That's what they were supposed to be, and then they got basically compromised. People came in.
I mean, it's obvious when you go through when you have we call it NOS, you call it security clearance, nulla osta di segretezza. When you go through that levels of secrecy, then you arrive further and further, and you realize there is so many compromises. And at times, of course, those compromises can't suit you. But the problem for me was that in these secret societies, there was actually a mission that was originally bestowed upon some of them that was betrayed by the people of this generation, of this age. And so I thought initially I would like to bring back that old Christian element in Freemasonry, for example, or bring back some of the positive aspects of it, but it's way too late, I think, to think that people will abandon their materialistic approach or their occultist approach in favor of what I was proposing, which was to go back to that form of Freemasonry which influenced people like George Washington. If George Washington did the right thing, why not promoting that original form of Freemasonry? Unfortunately, it's no longer the case, though, because like I said, it seems like if you go in a lodge today and you are scourged because you are a follower of Trump, or you are too much of a Christian, it's incredible. I mean, I was really disappointed, because Freemasonry should not discuss neither politics or religion, but today it's becoming more and more obvious that to join Freemasonry, you need to be an atheist, quite outspoken about your libtard ways. And if you are a conservative, then, well, then you are segregated to some dark corner, and you're not made to evolve in the system, no?
That's incredible. So so we'll evolve a little bit more in your book before we finish up. Chapter 4, the unfolding of the Fourth Reich. So you talk about the Illuminati playgrounds of Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, from H.G. Wells to Dr. Fauci and One World Religion. Tell us a little bit about that. Let's talk about chapter 5. Let's kind of let's tie it all together. It's unbelievable. I love talking with you, your wealth of information. So what are your feelings on the Fourth Reich, how it's unfolding?
Okay, the Fourth Reich, like I said, was always discussed by the occasional conspiracy theorists of sorts, like an obscure theory might be true, might be not. But then, you know, people like Jim Marrs, of course, the late Jim Marrs discussed it, but they were always regarded as fringe kind of conspiracies until you actually find there is evidence that is something much more consistent. When you see, for example, the fourth industrial revolution of Klaus Schwab, and Klaus Schwab is such a Nazi, he just can't help himself by being such a Nazi. I mean, it's not, it's in its DNA. His father was awarded a special award by the Nazis. I mean, it's like, you know, he just has it in his DNA. In my book, I wanted to explain, first of all, how, like I just said earlier in the show, the German Theosophical Society, the Austrian one, but also the Illuminati lodges in Germany, in Austria, they really helped arrive to where we are now. I mean, there will not really be even a new age. I mean, we think that new age is a product of California because it was here that it was further developed. But actually, in my book, I show how the first installment, the first kind of hobby they constructed to expand on these theories was actually done in Switzerland, was actually done by people from Germany, from Austria. It was developed in a place called Ascona, Switzerland. That's where Franz Hartmann went. And later on, in Mount Verita, this place, always in Switzerland, Theodor Reuss, Carl Gustav Jung, a lot of important people, further expanded on this concept of the new age. The very early, the OTO wasn't really founded by Aleister Crowley, this Ordo Templi Orientis. I explain in this book, it was founded actually between Germany and Austria, and by German people, German and Austrian gentlemen, a very important one. And then it developed, but it kind of like sprang out of something that was already there. There was already, the Illuminati had laid the fundamentals for these organizations. They were experimenting with new ones because Adam Weishaupt had been persecuted immediately in the 1780s. Soon after he founded the Illuminati, he suffered persecution. So what he said was simply to resurface with different names, to confound the people. But their ideology was communism. And so the first thing that they created that really helped the development of communism was, for example, the League of the Just, that was used after by Karl Marx to publish his manifesto. So, I mean, we are talking here about the consistent historical connections, the fact that, for example, in Switzerland, there was a very important branch of the Illuminati, the fact that was connected with both Germany and Austria, a series of Masonic lodges that were connected. And I try to explain all this world, which is at the time, let me tell you, not easy to digest or to grasp for the ordinary folk out there. So I try to, I'm glad that you appreciated this book because you are quite a sophisticated guy with a sophisticated preparation behind you. But then for the ordinary folk, so I try to make it possible through all the various notes I teach, but also through the way I approach this subject to make it more digestible. And also I explain the secret forces at work, which in the end, they are not only physical forces, but extra-dimensional. Like I talk about, for example, the opening of certain portals that was done out in the open in Switzerland not so long ago, with the milieu, with the of the whole technocracy of Europe present there. But I also explain how, for example, the Viennese lodges of Freemasonry then started to connect with the Catholic Church, building the basis of what now we are seeing with Pope Francis developing in a one-world religion. So I wanted to also explain how the Illuminati is structured, literally, by, in this book, as you know, I cite rituals of the Illuminati from Adam Weishaupt, the original rituals, so people can't say, oh no, you are talking rubbish or it's all in your head. No, I tend to take very credible academic sources to avoid all that. In fact, I tell you the truth, there has been nobody who has been able to debunk what I've written in this book. The fact that there was a guy called Leopold Bengel who then further developed the Illuminati in Austria, these are all historical facts. And so it's very difficult. Then of course, I talk about, for example, the Confessions of Lucifer, which was a channeled book that Lucifer transmitted to this Illuminati called Leopold Bengel. But it's not like the stuff of science fiction or fantasy, it's reality. When I talk about, for example, a guy like Michael Henrik Benninger, who used to be an ambassador for the Austrian government, who went in places like Sarajevo, and suddenly the wife dies in 2009, and in 2011, he's a Monsignor and ends up in the Vatican as a priest.
Wow.
He used to be a diplomat, head diplomat, an ambassador, and now he's working at the head of the project for the interreligious establishment of the Human Fraternity Project of Pope Francis. And he even published a book, and you can see the photos I put in the book. You talked about the fact I put photos, and one of the photos is the photo of this gentleman called Michael Henrik Benninger in 2020 in Vienna, while he's presenting next to the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Austria, and there was even the German Grand Master attending, this book about how to reconcile Freemasonry with Catholicism. And also I showed a photo of this gentleman with the vice president of the Academy of the Illuminati next to a bunch of Muslims. I mean, this is evidence that you can't deny, you know. It's like, of course, to write books like this, you have to adopt a very intelligent approach. At times, you know, you have to be a little bit sneaky, hidden cameras, recording thing. You risk your life, because if you get, they probably kill you. But, I mean, in the end, I guess that is worth it. Regarding what you discussed a second ago, when you, of course, invited me to discuss this last segment of the book, there is also the most historical part connected with H.G. Wells, who invented the term New World Order, his twisted ideology, how it helped really build up what is now this whole New World Order. So H.G. Wells definitely is an important, because we see him as somebody who was writing maybe fictional books, somebody who was involved with theories that were, but he was actually shaping what these people that followed now are doing. And so their idea to reduce the world population was actually a troubling dilemma for Wells, who was living almost 100 years ago. and they were like, kind of, okay, so how should we do it after this and that, you know? So, and then actually now we are living what these guys have outlined for us a long time ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've exposed these guys for quite some time. Now, I look at Rudolf Steiner, and he said in 1917, he said this, he foresaw a vaccine that would drive all inclination towards spirituality out of people's souls. So, you know, a lot of people that are very, you know, insightful have been warning us. You're like one of those people. You're warning us. And because you're warning us and giving us those insights, we now know that the elite is well organized, but they're deranged and perverted, like you say in chapter 5. And you also say the Illuminati fear the kingdom of God, which we belong to, and we are very powerful there.
Yeah, that is another point that I wanted to make people know. I know
good.
that it might not be understood immediately by everybody, because it's a very harsh thing to say. When I said the republic on which we stand has an expiry date, and people will, but how? I mean, we founded it. We founded in 1776. This can't have an expiry date. This is our life. And I just tell them, okay, pick up your $1 bill. It says in God we trust. Yes. It says that God is coming back. Okay. So you think when the Messiah is here, he wants to hear about your constitutional republic? No, it's the kingdom of God. And that's it. People like, then they are kind of like a little bit surprised by the outcome of it, because they can't say no. They can't say, oh, well, but we have to bring him to the White House. What are you talking about? The kingdom of God. The Son of God comes here, you give him a throne, and he's the king. There is no democracy. There is no talk of it, and it's never going to be ever again talk of it. And I know that that sounds a little bit harsh for some people, because they're like, well, but what are you going to do? Are you going to invite Jesus to the Oprah Winfrey show? Are you going to make a mockery out of it? No, it's not possible. It doesn't work that way. And we know it because, of course, the father founders of America were, and even the Puritan fathers that came here on the Mayflower, they were coming here to establish America for a special purpose. And that special purpose will be understood only when eventually we have the Messiah showing up. And then at that point, it will be like, ah, bingo, now I get it. But it's kind of confusing for a lot of people, because they will be like, I fought all my life, you know, on the republic on which I stand, that we all people are created equal. Sorry to say, but Jesus has not been created equal. It's communism. If you start talking about that kind of thing, and that is what the enemy wants to do. So the Illuminati started to attack the monarchies. And they did it from the French Revolution onwards methodically, in order to eliminate them completely. Like I show in my book, certain documents that reveal what the Illuminati will do to the kings who will not bow down to the, if you bow down, you can be like the Queen of, you know, kind of a constitutional monarchy, fine. And there is constitutional monarchies in Europe who have survived. But if you were an absolutist, like the Tsar, out of the way, the Kaiser, out of the way. So they got the Emperor of China out of the way. They literally went after every single representative of a monarchy, an empire that could actually be deemed a threat, because in the end, monarchies were built as a reflection of the kingdom of God. When we have the crown, especially in the Western culture, you have the crown, you have a little ball with a cross on top, no? Now that ball represents the word, that cross represents the 4 elements, but it's also a Christian element, a reflection of Christ the King. And so there was for 2,000 years after Christ came, this idea that monarchy was the perfect thing. Then the monarchy itself started to become corrupt. But it got corrupt, like I point out in the previous volume 6, if you go there, for example, in France, it got corrupt by Satanism. It got corrupt by the practice of Satanism. If you reach, I mean, I speak about it, no? The history, Catherine de' Medici, the first Black Mass, thousands of fetuses found in France in that time, and all kinds of things. This before even the French Revolution. Wow. So obviously, when you corrupt a system, then that system is doomed. And but now we have to reflect. why the Illuminati so aggressively wanted only republics. But those republics, if we go investigate them, especially the ones in Europe, even the French one, don't really have the same constitution like the American one, which is instead really built out of an understanding of the future and how to defend the people of America, but also how to prepare them. In God we trust. And that is the simple thing we have to know. In God we trust. Mm-hmm. And so we trust God. The moment in which, hopefully, we see in the next 10 to 15 years such a dramatic change in society, that will be the moment in which the Son of God will manifest and tell everybody, you can either choose me or you can go with the Antichrist. You can have the mark of the beast. You can have the QR code. You can basically have a microchip implanted and lose forever your soul. Yep. It's up to you. Choice is yours. It's not mine. The choice was yours in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve, and there was the first and the apple. The choice was always yours. Now, as Christians, we know that the baptism has cleared the original sin, and we are going back towards the Garden of Eden. I hope that we can, at least those of us who are of clear mind and we are of good morals and ethics and want to just believe that there can be an alternative to all this, that the kingdom of God will eventually manifest. We need to believe that. And we need to be very strong in our position. We can't be like those televangelists who are preaching from the pulpit all the time, but they don't do the work, they only do the talk. It doesn't work that way. And Jesus would say, what is this? What is this? Is this my kingdom or is this a joke? Is this Disneyland? No, because Disneyland is made of fantasy. Is this Disney World? Is made of fantasy. It's an illusion. It's not there. When you go to Disney World, you can travel around many countries. You can go to Norway, to Mexico, but it's not Norway. It's not Mexico. It's an illusion. So Jesus will tell you, I'm the reality. They will give you the metaverse, because the metaverse is the ultimate trap to basically join the multiverse. The multiverse, which I describe in the Invisible Master, which you have read, and I know you appreciate very much. It's a great book. And in that book, Invisible Master, well, if you think about it, how easy it will be for those entities to then control us through the metaverse. The metaverse is basically an artificial way of joining the multiverse. Yep. They're even saying to us, Dr. Strange, join the Illuminati. Welcome to the multiverse. It's like nowadays they are right in your face. They don't even hide it anymore, and that is pretty scary. Yep.
Well, Leo, it's been amazing having you on. Boy, you really rolled it up this last few minutes. Wow, that was incredible insights. I love your information. I love your passion. I love your work. Your work is just incredible. Everyone should get it. Everyone should read it. Everyone should enjoy it and flip through it like I do all the time. I always see it and I like flip through it and get more insights. Even though I've read it, I read it again. I have it everywhere. So it's good.
That is what I usually do with my favorite authors. I keep them next to me and I keep on reading them and rereading them and using them as manuals, tools for getting a better understanding. I hope that really we can all pray for the future of America this 4th of July, because it's an uncertain future. And it's an uncertain future in uncertain times. But we know that some promises were made a long time ago. And we know that those visions that were also given to St. John in Patmos, they are still valid for those who believe, of course, in the return of Jesus. But even for those who are not Christians, like the Jews who are still waiting for the Messiah, they are also encouraged in this moment of time. And I know that a lot of them are maybe anticipating the arrival of the Messiah that was supposed to happen in a while, but kind of anticipating the times. Because when we see that the end times is laid in front of us, there is no future for humanity if we don't make some dramatic decisions. But of course, the problem being that within 10 years, we might be pushed outside of this civilization, and we might be forced into constructing an alternative reality, maybe with small communities, like-minded communities, like the early Christians. Definitely don't stay in the cities, because the cities are doomed. This is one of the things that I insist on also in my book. Thank you for having me on, Michael. God bless you. God bless all our viewers. And I wish them all a great 4th of July in this great country of the United States of America. Still united, and we hope that it keeps on being united. We will have to fight, though, and hopefully we will not have to fight between ourselves, because American against American is a very ugly thing. And I feel very much like the 1850s, and I don't like it. So I will pray that we can stay united. That's my main prayer for this 4th of July.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. That's a great prayer to have. Thank you, Leo. And yeah, I'll have all your info down in the description box, and I'll share this widely. So thanks again, Leo. Absolutely phenomenal show. And I look forward to having you on when you have your next book too.
Thank you so much. I will be back with my next book.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Take care, Michael. All the best.
All right, cheers.